want to talk to you about something that some would say is fictional, but you would say, hold up, we don't know for certain, and that's Bigfoot.
Everybody talks to me.
It looked like somebody was bent over and had their head in the window of the deer blind, and it either heard me or smelt me, and he pulled his head out of the tent and stood straight up, and that shocked me. They don't make people that big.
The way it moved, almost as if it was gliding across the beach. I've never seen anything move like that in my life. They were screaming at each other in gibberish. It sounded like a language, and they were chuntering away back and forwards, back and forwards, back and forwards. I know what a bear looks like, and there is no way on this planet that what I saw were bears.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
See ya!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
This is Ninka from Northern Alberta, Canada, and you are listening to the best show out there, Sasquatch Chronicles.
I spoke to Miss Goodall probably about 10, maybe 11 years ago. I was trying to get her on the show, and I think I called her foundation and asked to speak with her, and they transferred me right to Jane, and her and I talked for probably about 10 minutes or so, and I'd asked her if she'd come on the show, and she was like, yeah, I would absolutely come on the show, and she transferred me back to her people. And I didn't realize there was going to be a fee to have her come on the show, and I couldn't pay it back then. I doubt I could pay it today. And I was kind of bummed out about it, but I don't really look at that as a negative experience. I mean, that's Jane Goodall, for God's sakes. Good for her. I'm glad she's charging to come on different shows. And, sometimes you meet people and you wonder if they're really that person. And I can tell you, the small conversation I had with her, she's just as lovely and just as charming as you would imagine her to be. And I'm going to play a little clip. I think this captures Jane's personality, her spirit, more than anything else. This is about a 5-6 minute clip. Let's take a listen as we remember Jane Goodall.
Come on. Come on.
It's how you might imagine Jane Goodall to be.
Stop screaming at me.
We just met and were setting up, but the famed naturalist was more focused on a visit from a robin.
There you are.
Than our camera crew.
Oops, hello, bee.
She first learned about the bees and, yes, the birds here at her childhood home in Bournemouth, England.
You grew up looking out on this garden, dreaming of another world.
Yep. I did.
And she found it in the Gombe rainforest of Tanzania, where her groundbreaking work studying chimpanzees in the 1960s made her a National Geographic cover girl. At age 87, she can still be found on the front of magazines and running a conservation empire. Her Jane Goodall Institute, dedicated to protecting wildlife and the environment, has chapters in 24 countries. And there's Roots and Shoots, a program to engage youth around the world. Goodall's own fascination with animals started when she was a kid, spending hours in this tree with library books.
I read Tarzan up there. There was no TV back then. That's when my dream began. I'll go to Africa, live with animals, write books about them. That was it. No intention of being a scientist, because girls didn't do that sort of thing.
She started as a secretary, then landed a job as an assistant to paleoanthropologist Louis Leakey. He was on the lookout for a, quote, fresh pair of eyes and fiery spirit.
I clearly was passionate. I clearly had an understanding of animals, and he felt that women might be better in the field, that we might be more patient. Also, he wanted somebody who hadn't been to college, so he wanted an unbiased mind.
Leakey raised money for Goodall to spend 6 months in the jungle studying chimpanzees in Tanzania. Little was known about them at the time.
So these were your earliest observations?
Goodall filled stacks of journals with notes.
I transcribe these every night.
Wow, look at this, 37, 38, 39, 40. Every minute you were noting the behavior.
Yes.
Crucially, she witnessed the chimps fashioning and using tools, something believed until then was unique to humans.
Did you realize that what you were seeing was so extraordinary?
I knew that it was going to make a huge impact. In fact, a lot of people refused to believe it. Why should they believe this young girl? She hadn't even been to college.
But editors at National Geographic were intrigued.
They sent a photographer, cameraman, Hugo van Lauwijk. And when his film started doing the rounds, showing the chimps using little twigs to fish for termites, they had to believe.
There was a directive from National Geographic to not only focus on the chimpanzees, but for Hugo to focus on you.
I know.
Did that bother you?
Well, it was frustrating, but, oh, Jane, I want you washing your hair. Oh, could you wash it again? I didn't get the light right.
This is funny. In a wilderness boudoir, Miss Goodall lathers her blonde hair with water pure enough to drink.
It put me in a limelight that I did not want. But then there was all this press about, oh, she's only, got money from the Geographic because she's got nice legs and things.
Did you feel objectified?
It was just a different world. And so, well, if it's my legs, truly, that have helped me get money to study the chimps, thank you, legs.
That photographer became her husband, and they had a son together. And in her decades-long study, those chimps also became much more to her.
Ollie, grumpy old JB, Flo with little Flint.
It's almost like you're showing me family photos.
Yeah, I know.
Chimpanzees share 99% of humans' DNA. The difference, Goodall points out, is the development of our intellect.
Which makes it utterly absurd that this most intellectual of all creatures on the planet is destroying its only home.
That's your mission now.
Yes, the effects of climate change, the hurricanes, the typhoons, the flooding, the fires. So the key important thing is to give people hope that we can get through, because if you don't have hope, why bother?
She's written a new book on hope and calls it a survival guide for trying times. It's part of her race to reach as many people as possible.
This planet, it doesn't have infinite natural resources. They're finite. They can come to an end. So what's going to happen if we carry on with business as usual?
Pre-pandemic, Goodall says she was on the road 300 days a year. Now she lectures and holds meetings from her room in the attic. Virtual Jane, as she calls herself.
Do you want to be this busy?
No.
Really?
No.
Why do you do it?
Because there's a message to get out, and I'm getting older, and there's less time left ahead of me, and the world's falling to pieces.
You feel this urgency?
Yes, I do.
It means a lot of talking.
Have another sip.
She says whiskey soothes her vocal cords.
I don't want to turn into a couch potato.
A daily walk soothes pretty much everything else.
You can't just sit all day. It's ridiculous.
I can't imagine that you've ever sat all day.
Not really, no. Hello, seagulls.
Here along the English Channel, it's again clear she's drawn to the natural world, but protecting that means shifting her attention.
So now I have to speak to bankers and lawyers, CEOs and politicians.
What do you say?
I tell them stories. I try and reach the heart. People have to change from within.
And that change, Goodall says, can start small.
Everybody can do something. I mean, when you go shopping, you can ask yourself, did this product harm the environment when it was made? Was it cruel to animals? Is it cheap? Why is it cheap? Is it cheap because of unfair wages?
You're asking people to do a lot.
Well, why not? If they care about the future, especially if they've got children, you don't have to do it all. You know, even if you just pick one thing, like eating less meat. Just do something.
Rest in peace, Miss Goodall. Your light definitely endures. Again, one of the sweetest people I think I've ever met. Tonight we'll be chatting with Charlie. And Charlie had an encounter over in Georgia. This was just a week ago this happened to him. I'll kind of let him go into this experience. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Charlie to the show. Charlie, thanks for coming on.
It's great to meet you, Wes.
Yeah, my father's name was Charles. It's definitely nice to have you on here, Charlie. And you had this experience out in Georgia. Gosh, we're only going back like a week ago. If you would kind of start from the beginning, what were you doing and what happened?
All right, so I like to do bike packing, where I load my camping gear in bags and stuff on my bike and ride out on my bike to camp spots. I do overnight campouts, and once a year I try to do like a multi-day trip where I'm out 3-4 days. But there's a trail here in Atlanta. It's an old rail line called the Silver Comet Trail. A lot of people hike it, bike it, but there is a small campsite on the trail set aside for bike packers like me. And I'll go out there maybe like 4 or 5 times a year as just like a training ride. Go out there, camp overnight in that little campground. Then in the morning, pack back up and ride my bike back, get in the car and go home. But I do that a lot for training. Sometimes I'll have new gear that I want to try out, so I'll put on my bike and I'll ride out there. But there have been some odd things that have happened in the past at that campground. But this time, when I went out there, I got there late afternoon. There are 2 small camp spots in there that have a flat space for a tent. There's a bench that's kind of, the posts for the bench are cemented in. There's a fire pit and stuff. But what's important to the story is there's a hill right next to this camp spot. Like right next to my tent, I'd have to, if I wanted to go up that hill, it was right by my tent, and I'd have to climb up that hill right away. But I got there, I set up my camp. I got out my little camp chair, lightweight camp chair that I take with me. And then I do that, and I use that bench as a table where I can cook my food, whatever. So this was getting into evening, really close to dark. I was sitting in my chair. I had my little camp stove on that bench, cooking some dinner. And I was just kind of leaning back in my chair and reading a book. And when I go out there now, again, you can hear stuff that falls through the leaves in the trees and hits the ground. And I don't pay it a lot of attention because the trees out there drop branches, acorns, hickory nuts, pine cones. So it's not an uncommon thing. But this time I noticed that it seemed to be a lot more, and some of those things were landing right in my tent spot. But made me think, oh my gosh, are those rocks? Is what I thought in my head for a minute. And then I thought, you know what? It's that time of year when more acorns are dropping, hickory nuts are dropping. Don't worry about it. And it was just getting dark. Like I was at the point where I was going to go and maybe get my headlamp. It was getting that dark. You know, extra lights, cook my dinner, whatever. When a rock came off of that hill from just about my 9 o'clock position, and I knew it was a rock because it landed right between my feet and then bounced into my right ankle and hit it kind of hard. And the rock was maybe about 50% bigger than a golf ball. And so it both surprised me and it hurt me because it hit right into that spot right above my ankle. And so I said, ouch, really kind of loud because it startled me and it hurt me. And as soon as I did that, up on that hill, I heard a loud voice, a really loud voice, blah, 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 kind of that. It sounded like some of those Ron Moorhead recordings of just kind of a language, but it sounded garbled together. Lasted maybe a second and a half, like a good sentence, maybe as we're speaking, just a and then right after that, from about my 7 o'clock position, I heard another answer, the same kind of speech. And as soon as my brain registered that I just got hit by a rock, and then I heard these two samurai chatter voices, as soon as my brain registered what was really going on there, like there is at least 2 Sasquatch right here. It scared me. It scared me really bad. I'd heard people before describe like ice shooting through their veins. That's exactly what I felt like that adrenaline just shot through me. I started shaking badly, really kind of shaking, uncontrollable, like my hands, my legs were just shaking. And, it took me a minute to get off of my chair and over on my bike. I have a bag that's strapped to the handlebars, and I keep a can of bear spray in there because sometimes there are aggressive dogs out where I'm riding, and I use the bear spray to keep them away from me and my bike. But also when I go more into the wilderness, I always take my 357 mag with me too. So I got up, I walked over to the bike, and I put the bear spray in my left pocket and the gun in my right pocket, and I got my headlamp out, and I started cleaning up my camp, packing up because I wanted to get out of there. I wanted to get out of there pretty bad. It was, I was just so scared in that minute, and I guess I went into fight or flight mode, and my brain was telling me to get away. So I started packing up my stuff, but now it's dark, and then I had the thought, like, you can't ride your bike in the dark. That would be as dangerous as anything else, especially out there. There are creeks and bridges and some marshes. Like, you can't just go out there and ride because it'd be dangerous. So, and then my thought is, like, if they want me, they're a lot faster than I would be on my bike too. So maybe it would be better if I just got myself into a position there in my camp where, I could just sit there and kind of see what could happen. So I moved my chair to where I was facing that hill where I heard the voices and where the rock came from. I pointed my chair that way, and I had a big fat oak tree at my back, and I just sat there, and nothing else happened. So I'm not sure how long I sat there. It was probably at least an hour, and nothing happened. And I started to calm down a little bit, like, okay, maybe they're just messing with me and they're gone. Because I didn't hear I didn't hear anything anymore. So it got really dark, and I calmed down a lot, even though I was still, like, my brain was still just going over and over again what had happened. But so I got to the point where I thought, okay, well, maybe I can get into my tent. Maybe they're gone. Maybe I can calm down. I'll read my book for a while to try to get my brain on something else. So, and it's just a little tent. It's a one-man tent, and it's just barely big enough for me. But I got into the tent. I got myself settled down on my little air mattress, and I had my headlamp on, and I started reading in my book again. And I'm thinking it was about 10, 15 minutes from when I got into my tent that I heard a really loud whoop right up on that same hill again. Just a whoop, but really loud. It was extremely loud. It was longer than I could do it. It wasn't like the Ohio howl, that deep tornado siren kind of sound. This was a whoop. Started low and went very high pitch, but it was as loud as if you would be standing next to a police car when they turn on their siren that goes whoop whoop like that. Like, I felt it in my body. It was that loud. The one part that I forgot is that I wasn't alone in that camp. There was another guy who had a campsite up about 150 yards from me. Sometimes homeless people go out and camp in that area. And based on how his camp was set up and how he had everything there, I believed he to be a homeless person who was just needed a place to live for a while. When I got there, his very, very friendly dog came over and to say hi to me. Looked like a pit bull something mix, but super friendly dog. It didn't see me as anything scary for it to be scared of. So he just ran over there, tail wagging, all that stuff until he got called back. But as soon as that whoop happened, I heard the other guy yell, "What in the bleep bleep is that?" And then that dog went crazy. It was barking and it was growling and it was snarling. And even though, I was about 150 yards away from them, I could hear that dog really, just, it was I've had dogs. I have a dog. It kind of sounded like a difference between like an I'm scared bark and I want to chase you away kind of bark from the dog. But he, for a solid maybe, I'm guessing 5 minutes, that dog was just barking and growling, and then it calmed down. And so I thought, well, maybe if the dog's calmed down, then whatever that was is moving away now and stuff. Eventually I got tired enough that I couldn't stay awake, and I slept through the night. But I was up early in the morning. As soon as it was light enough, I packed up my camp and I got out of there and came home. But even since then, it's been a week, but I still get shaky when I talk about it. I've had some nightmares in between then and now. And I always kind of thought, if I ever have an encounter with a Bigfoot, I think I'd be telling people like, oh, hey, guess what happened to me? I had this encounter with a Sasquatch and it was so cool, but it is not how I feel. It made me feel so small and so vulnerable that even when I had my bear spray in my gun, I'm like, this probably isn't enough. You know, I was just so shaken, and I just felt really kind of helpless in that moment too, I guess. And that's about all that I remember happened.
Yeah, I don't blame you, Charlie, for being scared. The very first time I ever heard the chatter in person was actually in East Texas. And it's a big difference when you hear it in a recording or you hear it in my intro, and when you hear it in person. It's apples and oranges. And it startled me when I heard it. I was like, oh man, you know, because it's so odd to hear it. And then on top of that, it's so loud, louder than anyone else could speak, any other human being could speak. I get why you would be upset and why it would affect you. And it almost makes me wonder if, and I'm just speculating, of course, but when the rock was thrown, the fact that it actually hit you, I almost wonder if one of them was kind of reprimanding the other one, like he actually hit him, you know. And again, I'm just speculating. I realize it's 2025, but at the time, did you know what was going on?
Yeah, I did. I knew what was going on. I've been kind of a Bigfoot fan for a long time. I listen to your podcast. I listen to some other podcasts and stuff, because I've had some things happen in the past. Like there was something that happened when I was a teenager, and then later, after I started learning about Bigfoot and stuff, I look back and think, well, what we thought was a bear may have just been a Bigfoot, you know? So I've kind of been steeped into, you know, what people talk about, traits, behaviors, and stuff. And I'd always kind of wanted the ability to prove to myself whether this is real or not. So when it was happening, when I knew that was a rock that got thrown, and then those voices, I knew exactly what it was.
Yeah, and I get the position you're in, because it's kind of hard to get up and leave in the middle of the night, especially in your situation where you're out there training and you're on a bike. Leaving in the middle of the night is probably the worst thing you could do. You'd mentioned things that happened earlier when you were younger. What happened?
So when it was the summer when I was 15, I believe 15 or 16, our church young men's group went on a backpacking trip in the West Tetons, right on the Idaho-Wyoming border. We were planning to hike for 2 days to get to a lake up there in the mountains, and then spend 3 days at that lake and then hike out. We got to the trailhead there, and we were kind of unloading our gear out of the trucks, and a Forest Service truck pulled into that same little parking lot, and a ranger got out, and she asked us, you know, hey, which trail are you taking? Where are you going? So we told her we're going to be going up to Green Lake. And she said, oh, there's an active grizzly bear in that area, so make sure you take precautions with your food and your cooking and your waste and your trash and stuff. Make sure that you're keeping it away from your camp, hang your food in the trees so you're not attracting a bear into there. And so we're like, okay, whatever. So that day we hiked up to a small lake, spent the night. The next day we hiked just a couple of miles into Green Lake, where we wanted to stay for 3 days there at that lake. So we got our camp set up in an area. It was an open area, but it was surrounded by lodgepole pines and Douglas fir trees, and right on the edge of this just beautiful lake, crystal clear water, kind of sitting in a horseshoe of cliffs there. And it is really an astonishingly beautiful space to be in. But we knew that there were a lot of cutthroat trout in that lake. So almost all of us brought fishing tackle. So we got our camp set up. Everyone went to the lake to go fishing, and we caught a lot of trout, a lot. So that night for dinner, we had a big fish fry on the fire. We made a big fire. Most of us had brought little mess kit skillets with us. And so we fried up all of those fish and just had fish and rice and vegetables and stuff for dinner. And it was great. And, but we all were sitting around the fire talking pretty late into the night. And we kind of decided, we'll just clean up all of this cooking mess in the morning. You know, we stuck skillets that had fish bones and grease and stuff in them. And we're like, we'll just clean that up in the morning. We did not follow any of the bear precautions that the ranger told us to follow. So during the night, so let me back up. So there were 8 teenage boys there between the ages of 14 and 18. And then we had 3 adult leaders with us. And all of those adult leaders were fathers of some of the boys in our group. So during the night, one of those leaders heard something moving around in our camp. So he quietly unzipped the tent and turned on his flashlight to see if someone or something was out there. And this was back in the 80s where, you know, we hiked in with those little mini mag lights because they're smaller and lightweight, but they're really underpowered, especially compared to what you can get today in a flashlight. So he said he saw something big, brown, and hairy and got out and yelled at it and chased it out of the camp and stuff. And then other people woke up because he was yelling and stuff. My tent mate woke me up and he's like, "Hey, dude, the bear was in our camp." So everybody got up, and it was middle of the night, deep in the night, but we all got up and we're kind of excited, and we're all shining our little flashlights around in the forest to see if we could see the bear, or looking for tracks on the ground, but it was really gravelly, so there weren't any tracks of anything there. But we decided that we had had a close call with the bear, so we started cleaning up all of our stuff in the middle of the night. We didn't want the bear to come back, so we're washing our skillets, we're packing up food, we're doing everything that we could in the night to do what we should have done before. But as we're cleaning up, and now and again, a rock would hit the ground and kind of roll it through our camp and stuff. Not a lot, but just every now and then you'd kind of hear a thump as something hit like that packed ground at our camp. There was a lot, it was packed rocky packed areas with some dirt, but you could tell it was a rock because it would hit and it would roll across the other rocks on the ground. So even though it was dark, we could tell this was a rock. So it would clatter and stuff. And that happened maybe 10 times while we were camping up. And I remember one of the adult leaders saying, like, "How can bears throw rocks?" and stuff. And so anyways, that story was, it happened, but it was years and years, gosh, a lot of years, couple of decades later, maybe even, 2 decades-ish, 25 years later, I stumbled upon the show, Finding Bigfoot, and was really interested. But as I learned things about what people say Sasquatch does, I heard about the rock throwing. And that made me think, was that a bear? Or was that a Bigfoot that was in our camp? Or if it was a Bigfoot, maybe people thought it was a bear, and that's why they said there was a bear in the area. But I can't think of how a bear would throw a rock. So that's always made me kind of, I wonder if Bigfoot's real, then maybe that was. But one other crazy incident that happened was many, many years later. I was an adult leader for another young men's group from our church, and we decided to do an evening hike up there. We went to Logan Canyon, and we wanted to hike up to, there's some natural arches high on the mountain in the canyon. We wanted to hike up there, and we went up there on a Wednesday evening because we knew that on a weekday there probably wouldn't be anybody else hiking that trail. Like the weekends, there are hundreds of people who hike that trail. But we decided to go up there, and at the time, I was really overweight and out of shape. And so it took me a lot longer to get up to the top of that hike. So we got up there much later than we thought we would, and it was starting to get dark by the time I got up there. My big fat slow self, So we stayed there for a few minutes, and we started hiking down. And when you're really overweight and out of shape, you don't move any faster going downhill because all that weight puts a lot of pressure on your joints. So anyways, all that is to say that by the time we were really on the trail and moving down, it became dark. We had all brought flashlights and headlamps just in case. And so we had our headlights or our headlamps and our flashlights on as we're moving down the trail. And we were maybe about 20, 25, maybe 30 minutes into our hike back down when we heard a loud knock on the hill above us. It almost sounded like a PVC pipe being hit against a tree with a much more hollow sound to it. But that made us all kind of pause, and someone's like, what the heck was that? And in my brain, I'm thinking, holy cow, that could be a Sasquatch, but I didn't say anything out loud. I didn't want to freak anybody out or anything at that time. But that's what went through my brain is that sounded like a wood knock. That might be a Bigfoot and stuff. So, but we kept hiking down, and right when we were maybe a quarter mile from the bottom of the trail where the parking lot was, a tree came down right above us on the hillside. It was unmistakable sound as it started crunching and falling down the hill. And it was so close to us that I actually braced because I thought I might get hit by this thing as it comes down and stuff. So that made us all stop and, wow, what was that? Why? And someone else said, why would that tree come down? There's no wind in this canyon right now and stuff. But that was exactly what it sounded like. Just a big tree up the hill from us in the dark came crashing down and stuff. So I didn't really say anything out loud at the time, but I'm like, holy cow, that really fits the Sasquatch, Bigfoot category of strange things. And then there's just one other thing that happened that my wife and I went hiking one day in one of the canyons there. And I wanted to look for this meadow that I had seen on Google Maps. It looked like a nice camping spot. Some of my kids were smaller then. They wanted to start doing backpack campouts. And I thought we would hike up this trail, and this meadow looked like it was maybe a couple of miles up the trail. It'd be a great place to camp, but the meadow wasn't on the trail. We would have had to go up the hillside to actually find the meadow. So we went hiking up the trail, and then we turned and went up the side of the mountain looking for this meadow, and we couldn't find it and stuff. But we walked around and we found a game trail that went back down the hill. And so we used that game trail to walk down, and you could tell it was a heavily used deer trail where they move from the higher slopes down into the bottom of the canyon to get water, and they go back up. Very heavily used trail. And so we were going down through that trail, and we kind of went around a boulder, and right in front of us were maybe 10 spruce trees that were laid down right across the trail and just kind of a big jumble right on across the trail. And I thought, like, wow, what brought these down? Because you can't see those fir trees aren't on that trail that far down. It's all scrub oak. The fir trees were all a few hundred yards up the mountain. And so I said, those are really out of place. Why are those down here? And then, like, what brought them down here? Was there an avalanche or something? But there wasn't any track of an avalanche from the winter. I just thought it was really strange. And as we got to the fir trees, I could see that they'd all been broken off down the trunk. They weren't cut. They were all snapped. And then they were stacked right across the trail in a jumble. We started kind of climbing over the trees, and that's when it dawned on me, like, if there was something that wanted to hunt deer right here, this would be great to set up this block on the trail. Deer come down the trail, they hit this barricade, they stop. It'd be easy for something right off the trail to jump out and grab it. And then my next thought was, yeah, it could jump out and grab you, because you're standing here looking at this thing. And that kind of gave me a little bit of a shiver down my back. So we kind of climbed over those trees, got down the trail, and then went right back down to the trailhead where our car was parked to get out of there. So it made me think, like, who would do this and why,
Yeah, that very first experience, Charlie, where the camp counselors were saying, what bear throws rocks? I can't tell you how many arguments. I'd like to say there were just regular conversations, but there were heavily debated arguments from hunters who have friends that are like, hey, contact this guy. And they have a similar experience. And, for whatever reason, a lot of hunters will go, well, I think it was just a bear. Bears don't throw rocks. And I think in their heart, they know something else is going on, but it's almost like they don't want to admit to it. The whole, the logs at the end of that game trail, I've actually had that happen to me on 2 different occasions, both with other people there, where I'll be up in an area, I'll turn around, come back, and there's logs across the road that were placed there. And exactly what you just said with it regarding being a trap is exactly what I thought. And I don't know if that's what they're doing, but I'm telling you, that went through my mind on both occasions. This area where you were camping, you'd mentioned other things had happened there. What other things had happened there before that night where they threw the rock at you?
A couple of years ago, I went out there on my bike, and like I said, sometimes there are homeless people that use those camps, and normally that hasn't ever been a problem for me. Most of them are friendly. They're okay. I don't care if they're there, But this one time I went out there and both camp spots were taken. It was obviously a big homeless camp. There were about 8 men out there. And stuff. So I came into the camp and, they said, hey, how you doing? And talked to them. And they said, yeah, you're welcome to, set up your camp here with us. But this time I got a really kind of bad vibe from them. So I'm like, I don't want to camp with these guys, but I also didn't want to turn around and ride my bike 40 plus miles back to my car where it was parked. So I decided I would go up that same hillside next to the camp. It's about 150 yards to the top of it. And I'm like, yeah, I think I'm just going to camp up there. So I pushed my bike up that hill and I found a nice spot where I put my hammock up. And I gathered some firewood and had myself a little campfire. I roasted hot dogs on the fire for my dinner, and had an uneventful night, packed up in the morning and went home. But a couple months later, my teenage son did a bike trip with me out there. He went with me and we got to the camp. There was nobody there. Nobody was camping there. So we set up our stuff and we went looking for firewood. and started climbing up that hill, picking up fallen branches and stuff. And as we moved up the hill, I just said, "Hey, you want to see that camp spot where I stayed up here?" So we walked up there, and right where I had been camping, where my hammock and my little fire were at, there were two long pine trunks. Like, these were dead pine trunks that had been laid on the ground in an X right where I had been camping. And I thought, oh, that's an ominous sight. And then just a few yards away, we saw a structure up in the trees. And there was another pine tree trunk, and it was about 15 feet long too. And one end was resting in the crotch of one tree, and the other end was resting in the crotch of another tree. And it was about 12 feet off the ground. But then there was another tree trunk that was, the end of it was laid on that cross piece, that other trunk. So it's still up about 12 feet in there. And it came off of that one about a 90-degree angle. But on the other end of it, a young tree had been bent over, and the branches kind of wound around that trunk. And so you had a pole about 12 feet off the ground, another one that came off about 90 degrees, and that tree was pulled over and wound around that trunk. And then there were some other dead branches leaning up against those cross pieces. And we looked at that and said, that looks crazy, and especially since it's so high up there, and we thought, what would make this? And, we thought if people had made this, you'd had to have a bunch of people and at least 2 ladders out here to try to make something like that. And then I thought, why would anybody want to drag those ladders all the way out into the woods here and up on top of this hill to make something like that? Like, maybe I would have made something like that when I was a kid, but I wouldn't have dragged a ladder a mile into the woods to do it. I'd do that closer to my own backyard. So, and then I felt like that X on the ground where I camped was maybe a little bit of a warning, like, you camp down there in the campground, but don't come up here again, kind of thing. So that was the other odd thing that happened there. I don't have any good explanation for that structure and who made it and why. But you could look at it through a Bigfoot lens and say, well, Bigfoot could have done that, and especially since I've heard of like trees being bent over and woven into other trees or other objects, just made me think, odd.
And I know you're out there training, but what made you kind of go back to that area? Were you kind of hoping to have an encounter the night the rocks were thrown at you?
I'm not necessarily to have an encounter. It's just, it's a good camp space for me to go to because I can ride on the back that bike trail where I'm not in traffic, like out on the road. So I like that trail. So I just go back there to go camping. And I was aware that some, odd things had happened there, but I never really felt scared or nervous about it until something did happen. And then it scared me bad. So I hadn't really worried about an issue. And I thought, like I said, maybe if I ever had an encounter, it'd be more exciting than scary for me. I'd be excited like, wow, I just had this encounter. But I kind of went there with that mindset, but then things turned out different when it really did happen.
Yeah, I understand how you feel. Like I was telling you before, that chatter in East Texas, I mean, you would think someone in my position would be like, oh, wow, how cool is this? Let me break out the recorder. And it wasn't like that at all. First, it's shock. And then after, and you're still shocked, but after the shock, it was like, well, let's get out of here. And the chatter was weird. It was like 2 groups yelling at each other. It was like, F you, no F you. It was like that sort of vibe back and forth. And I was like, well, we're in the middle of these 2 groups, and I really don't want to be in the middle of this. This place where you have been going, do you have any plans on going back?
No, I'm not going to go back to that camp spot. It would make me far too nervous to be there. I still want to go bike packing, but I'm going to have a different perspective when I am out camping. But going back to Camp Comet, there on that same camp, I don't think I'll go there again. I know my wife has been nervous about me going there when I come back and I tell her, yeah, there was a homeless encampment there. And not that homeless people are bad or scary, but if something were to, but sometimes you can run into people who could be dangerous, so I was already thinking of finding somewhere else, but this experience made me think I'm not going to camp there again. I'll ride past it on my bike, but I won't camp there. I'll look for somewhere else to do that.
Yeah, I think finding the X from where you were camped the previous time would have unnerved me a little bit. I mean, that's kind of weird. Even for a human to do, that's kind of weird. I guess I would have to see it to really understand it, but it sounds weird to me. After all these experiences and kind of, being familiar with the subject, what do you think Sasquatch is?
I think the easy answer for me is that there's some kind of relic hominid, something in the primate family. We know all primates share a distant species that we all branched off of and became different primates. I think for me, the easy answer is it's some kind of primate that we just haven't been able to get a body, get something that we could tell science this is real. But I also know that there's a lot of other paranormal stuff that happens with Bigfoot. So some of it I'm not sure about. Some of them, like people tend to see the orbs. I haven't seen orbs, but the orbs make me pause and think, in association with Bigfoot, or there might be some aspects that aren't explainable too. It's easy to explain that there could be some kind of unknown hominid, but there are other aspects of it that make it could be more than that. I think until I see evidence that it's more than just some kind of hominid, I tend to lean more towards the hominid, but I'm not going to close my mind to any of the other aspects about it.
Yeah, I respect your thoughts on it, Charlie. Let me ask you, going back to that night when that rock was thrown at you and then you heard the chatter and then the whoops, what do you think that behavior was about? What do you think the intention was that night?
I think in the end, since nothing else happened, I think that they were maybe just testing or messing around, looking for a reaction, maybe a prank kind of thing, like, hey, let's throw rocks at this guy and see what happens. I was really scared, but at the same time, nothing really happened other than that. So I think I tend to lean towards they were just messing with me. Maybe when they threw that rock and it hit me and I reacted and they, I hear them talking back and forth. It may have been hey, did you see that? I pegged that guy,
And you probably said it in the beginning and I missed it, but how big was that rock that actually hit you?
It was, maybe about 50% bigger than a golf ball. So not real big. And it landed right between my feet. So it would have had to come in at an arc or it would have hit my knee or my leg. So it kind of came in at an arc and hit and then bounced. And so it wasn't thrown fast. Like I'm going to throw this fast enough to hurt this guy. It was, I think it was more of I'm going to throw this and see if he reacts to it.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, Charlie. I mean, when you look at the rock throwing behavior, and I still struggle with that behavior, but it's very consistent in eyewitness testimony. They'll throw rocks and people will get hit, but it's always the smaller rocks. And it's almost like an underhanded like if I threw something to you underhanded, I'm not trying to beam you with anything and it hits you. The larger rocks, so you'll often hear where like fishermen are out there in the middle of the night and they'll have like prickly boulders thrown at them, but no one ever gets hit. It's like it's always lands near them, but no one ever really gets hit. I find the rock throwing behavior strange because as a primate myself, I don't think I'd have that good of aim. And they seem to have good aim, which always kind of makes me wonder a little bit. But, at the end of the day, even with all the weird behavior that goes on with these creatures that you mentioned earlier, and especially from eyewitnesses who come forward, at the end of the day, they still act like a primate. They still act, whether it's human or non-human, they still act like a primate, like throwing rocks. And maybe you're right. Maybe they're like, hey, let me toss this at this guy and let's see what he does. That definitely could be it. Would you ever want to see one?
At a long distance. If I saw someone at a long distance, I would be excited to see that. There is one other thing that I forgot to mention earlier is, those voices were really loud. And my wife asked me, well, could those have been people? And I said, to be that loud, a person would have had to be screaming to be that loud. And these voices were not screaming voices. So I forgot to bring that up earlier. I thought I'd throw that in there that, but as for seeing one, part of me is, I think that I've had confirmation enough for me to say this is real. I don't think I need to see one now to say yes or no. But if I saw one at a distance, I think that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I could understand the way you feel. And going back to what you were saying earlier about, when you were telling your wife this and could have been a human and it's so loud, they would almost have to be screaming at you, but they're not screaming at you. And that's a great way to put it. I remember Ron Moorhead one time told me, he goes, what gives them away is their amplitude. The amplitude of sound that comes out, that's what gives them away. And he's right. It's like when you hear people say, oh, I heard a 1,000-pound owl out there in the middle of the night. They're not describing the weight of an owl. They're describing the amplitude coming off of it. It was almost too loud to be an owl. And going back to when I was telling you, when I heard the chatter, I mean, it was loud. It was really loud. I mean, I know I joked about them saying, hey, F you, but it wasn't like they were screaming at each other. It was just so loud. That was my impression, like they were screaming at each other. It's a scary night. I really appreciate you sharing it. And it'd be kind of cool to go back to that area to see if they're there or if they were passing through. And I know from talking to you that you're not really interested in that. And I don't blame you.
And as for camping alone, that's not going to happen anymore either. I'll go camp in a place where someone could come with me. They can drive out there and I'll ride my bike if we have to, but you can go stay at that camp, but I'll skip it.
Even Sasquatch aside, you really shouldn't camp alone. I haven't done it recently, but I would go out and look for missing people in this area. And, it's one guy camping and I'm like, why did he camp here? So you got to be careful out there. But I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and share what happened to you. I enjoyed chatting with you, Charlie. Thank you again.
Thanks, Wes.
And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember